The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a soft hiss. Ambassador Jack Morrison walked through them, his black diplomatic uniform pressed and clean. Behind him followed Captain Lisa Hayes, her military boots clicking on the smooth metal floor. The sound echoed in the huge room filled with floating seats arranged in a perfect circle. Jack had been coming to these meetings for 3 years now. 3 long years of sitting in the corner while alien species argued about trade routes and mining rights. 3 years of trying to warn them about the growing threat in the outer rim of the galaxy. 3 years of being ignored. The chamber filled with delegates from across the known galaxy. The Altarians floated in their water-filled suits, their tentacles moving slowly as they spoke in their musical language. The tall, bird-like centaurans preened their feathers and spoke in careful, measured tones about philosophy and peace. The insect-like Veltar clicked and buzzed as they discussed profit margins and trade agreements. Jack took his seat in the human section. It was smaller than the others, a reminder that humanity was still new to galactic politics. Earth had only joined the Council 10 years ago, and most species still saw humans as primitive newcomers who didn't understand how things worked in civilized space. The Council recognizes Ambassador Morrison of the Human Federation, announced the session leader, a tall Centauran with golden feathers. Jack stood up. He had practiced this speech many times. He pulled out a small device and activated a holographic display showing star charts and fleet movements. Honored delegates, Jack began. I come before you again with urgent information about the Zephyrian Empire. Our long-range scouts have detected massive military buildups in the outer rim. In the past 6 months, they have absorbed 4 more independent systems. A ripple of soft laughter went through the chamber. The Altarian delegate's translator made his amusement clear. Ambassador Morrison, the Zephyrians are expanding their territory through legal means. They offer protection to worlds that cannot defend themselves. This is normal galactic politics. Jack felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. With respect, delegate, our intelligence suggests otherwise. The populations of these worlds are being enslaved. Their resources are being stripped. Their defensive fleets are being absorbed into Zephyrian military units. Intelligence, snorted the Veltar representative. You mean rumors and fear-mongering. Humans see threats everywhere because you come from a violent world. Not every species solves problems with weapons. Captain Hayes stepped forward slightly. Jack could see the tension in her shoulders. She had been listening to this kind of dismissal for years. Her hand rested near her sidearm, not threateningly, but in a way that showed she was ready for anything. The Zephyrian Empire now controls over 40 systems, Jack continued. Their fleet strength has grown by 300% in 2 years. They are building massive shipyards and recruiting soldiers from every world they control. This is not normal expansion. The Centauran session leader raised a wing for silence. Ambassador Morrison, your concerns are noted. However, the Council has sent diplomatic missions to the Zephyrian Empire. They have assured us that their expansion is peaceful and beneficial to all parties involved. Did your diplomatic missions visit the worlds that were absorbed? Jack asked. Did they speak to the original populations? The Zephyrians provided all necessary documentation, the Centauran replied. Everything was done according to galactic law. Jack felt his patience wearing thin. Documentation can be forged. We have refugees from these worlds. They tell stories of mass deportations, forced labor, and summary executions of anyone who resisted. The Altarian delegate made a dismissive gesture with his tentacles. Refugees always exaggerate their suffering to gain sympathy. This is well known. We have sensor readings of the fleet movements, Jack pressed on. We have communications intercepts. We have... Enough, the Veltar delegate interrupted. Ambassador Morrison, your species has been part of this council for barely a decade. Perhaps you should spend more time learning how galactic politics work. Before making wild accusations about established empires, the chamber filled with murmurs of agreement. Jack looked around at the faces of the other delegates. Some looked bored, others looked annoyed, none looked concerned. Jack sat down slowly. Lisa Hayes leaned close to his ear. Sir, should I present the military analysis? Jack shook his head slightly. There was no point. These people had made up their minds long ago. Humans were the new. Kids, the violent ones, the species that saw danger everywhere because they came from a world of predators and prey. The session moved on to other business. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, a new art exhibition featuring Centaur poetry. Jack listened with half his attention, while his mind worked on other problems. After the session ended, the other delegates filed out in small groups. Jack could hear fragments of their conversations as they passed the human section. The humans are so paranoid, one Altarian was saying to another. They think everyone is planning to attack them. It's their primitive nature, replied a Centauran. They haven't learned to solve problems with words instead of weapons. At least they're harmless, added a Veltar. Their military is tiny compared to the established powers. They couldn't threaten anyone even if they wanted to. Jack and Lisa waited until the chamber was empty before standing up. Jack gathered his materials slowly, his mind already working on his next report to Earth Command. Sir, Lisa said quietly, how long do we keep trying? Jack looked at her. Lisa Hayes had been his military advisor for 2 years. She had fought in the border wars before humanity joined the galactic community. She understood threats in a way that most diplomats never would. As long as we can, Jack replied. It's our job to try to save them, even if they don't want to be saved. And when that stops working? Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then we save ourselves. They walked toward the exit together. Behind them, the empty chamber held only the echo of their footsteps and the fading warmth of dismissed warnings. Dr. Kevin Brooks was waiting for them in the corridor outside. The human scientific advisor looked worried. How did it go? Kevin asked, though he could already see the answer on their faces. The same as always, Jack replied. They think we're being paranoid. Kevin nodded grimly. I have new data from the deep space monitoring stations. The Zephyrian fleet movements are accelerating. They're not just expanding anymore. They're positioning for something big. Jack stopped walking. How big? Full-scale invasion big. Multiple. Battle groups moving toward the core worlds. If our projections are right, they'll be in position to strike within 6 months. Jack looked back toward the council chamber where the other delegates had dismissed his warnings just minutes before. Send everything to Earth Command. Full data burst. Highest priority. Sir? Kevin asked. We tried to warn them, Kevin. We tried to get them to prepare. We tried to make them understand that sometimes the only way to keep peace is to be ready for war. Jack's voice was quiet but firm. Now we prepare for what happens when you ignore the warnings. They walked through the corridors of the council station, past artwork from a dozen worlds, past gardens from 100 different biomes. It was beautiful and peaceful and civilized. Jack wondered how long it would stay that way. In 6 months, he thought, they might finally understand what humans had been trying to tell them all along. Some threats can't be talked away. Some enemies can't be reasoned. Within some warnings once ignored never come again. 3 months had passed since Jack Morrison's last warning to the Galactic Council. 3 months of strange quiet that made the other species think they had finally taught the anxious humans their place. In the council chambers, Jack smiled more than ever before. He agreed with every proposal, supported every motion, and never mentioned the Zephyrian Empire again. The other delegates congratulated themselves on handling the human problem so well. See how much better things are when they stop being so difficult, the Altarian delegate told his aide after another peaceful session. Humans just needed to learn some manners. What they didn't know was that across human space a very different kind of preparation was taking place. Admiral Gary Thompson stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching holographic displays that showed the position of every human military ship in the galaxy. To outside observers, the movements looked random. Ships heading to different systems for routine patrols or supply runs. Nothing that would alarm anyone watching. But Gary knew better. Every movement was part of a careful plan that had been months in the making. Human ships were positioning themselves at key points throughout the galaxy, creating a web of coverage that could respond to threats from any direction. Admiral, called Commander Tony Blake from his station, the 7th Fleet, has reached the staging area near the Vega system. They're reporting ready status. Good, Gary replied. What about the supply depots? All 47 hidden depots are fully stocked and operational, enough ammunition and fuel for extended operations without returning to human space. Gary nodded. The supply depots had been built in secret over the past 2 years, hidden in asteroid fields and dead systems that other species never bothered to explore. If war came, human forces would be able to operate far from their home bases for months. On the other side of Luna Base, Colonel Amy Rodriguez watched the final test of humanity's newest weapons. The testing range was buried deep inside the moon, where no alien sensors could detect what was happening. Fire when ready, Amy commanded. The weapon discharged with barely a whisper. On the target range, a mock-up of a Zephyrian battleship simply vanished. Not destroyed, not damaged, but completely gone as if it had never existed. Quantum disruption successful, reported Dr. Steve Miller from the observation deck. The target has been displaced outside normal space-time. Recovery is impossible. Amy smiled grimly. The other species had shared their technology freely with humanity, thinking humans were too primitive to understand the advanced concepts. They never imagined that human engineers had been studying everything they learned, improving it, and turning it into weapons. How many ships can we equip with this technology? Amy asked. Currently about 300, Steve replied. But we're building more every day. By the time we need them, we should have enough to equip the entire fleet. Meanwhile on Earth, President Helen Carter met with her Security Council in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House. The room was filled with screens showing intelligence data from across the galaxy. Tell me about the Zephyrian movements, Helen said to General Chris Morgan. Chris activated a large display showing the outer edge of the galaxy. Red dots marked Zephyrian fleets, and there were a lot of them. They've absorbed 6 more systems in the past month, Chris reported. Total fleet strength is now estimated at over 4,000 ships. They're moving in coordinated battle groups toward the core worlds. And the other species? Still building pleasure ships and research vessels. The Altarians just launched a new cruise liner. The Centaurans are debating the ethics of defensive weapons. The Veltar think economic pressure will solve everything. Helen shook her head. How can they be so blind? They've had peace for so long they've forgotten what war looks like, replied Admiral Susan Wright. They think words can stop everything. What about our own people? Helen asked. All civilian populations have been quietly relocated to fortified worlds, Susan reported. Industrial centers have been moved underground or to heavily defended systems. Our colony ships are ready to evacuate essential personnel if needed, Helen looked at the star charts. Human space was small compared to the ancient empires, but every world was now a fortress. Every system had multiple layers of defense. Every citizen knew what to do if war came. The irony is that we're the only species actually preparing for peace, Helen said. Real peace, the kind that comes from being too strong to attack. Back on the council station, Dr. Kevin Brooks worked in his small office, coordinating with research teams across human space. To anyone watching, he was just doing routine scientific work. But his real job was much more important. Kevin, called his assistant, Dr. Rachel Green. We're getting reports from our intelligence network. Kevin looked up from his datapad. For the past 3 years, humans had been placing scientists, diplomats, and trade representatives throughout the galaxy. The other species saw them as harmless researchers and negotiators. They never suspected that many of them were actually intelligence agents. What are they reporting? Kevin asked. The Zephyrians are moving faster than expected. Their advanced scouts are already probing the defenses of the core worlds. Some of the outer colonies are reporting strange ships at the edge of their systems. Kevin felt a chill. How long do we have? Maybe 3 weeks, maybe less. Kevin activated his secure communicator. Earth Command, this is Deep Space Research Station 7. We need to implement Protocol 7 immediately. The response came back quickly. Understood. All units are to move to final positions. Civilian evacuation is complete. We are ready. That evening, Jack Morrison attended another council session. The agenda was the usual collection of trade disputes and cultural exchanges. When asked about human concerns, Jack smiled his diplomatic smile and said, "Everything was fine. We're very pleased with the peaceful direction of galactic politics," Jack told the assembly. "Humanity looks forward to many years of continued cooperation." The other delegates nodded approvingly. The troublesome humans had finally learned their place. After the session, Jack walked through the station's observation deck. Through the large windows, he could see the stars. Somewhere out there, Zephyrian fleets were moving toward the heart of galactic civilization. Somewhere out there, human ships were moving into position for the fight of their lives. Captain Lisa Hayes joined him at the window. "Sir, we just received confirmation. All human forces are in position. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you ignore the warnings." Jack nodded. "Send the message to all human ships. Prepare for battle." "And Lisa?" "Yes, sir. Make sure they know that we tried to prevent this. We warned them. We begged them to prepare. What happens next is not our fault." Lisa saluted. "Understood, sir." As she walked away to send the orders, Jack remained at the window. In 3 weeks, maybe less, the galaxy would discover what humans were really capable of when they stopped trying to be diplomatic. The other species had wanted humanity to stop worrying about threats that might never come. They had wanted humans to be more civilized, more peaceful, more like them. Soon they would understand why that had been a terrible mistake. Because when humans stopped smiling and started preparing for war, the galaxy was about to see what 3 billion years of evolution as apex predators had created, and by then it would be too late to take back their dismissive laughter. The first warning came at 3:47 in the morning, Galactic Standard Time. Commander Tony Blake was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee in the Luna Base Command Center when every alert system started screaming at once. "Admiral Thompson to the command center immediately," the announcement echoed through the base. "This is not a drill." Gary Thompson arrived within minutes, still pulling on his uniform jacket. The main display showed a nightmare scenario that human intelligence had predicted, but hoped would never come. "Talk to me, Tony," Gary said, his voice steady despite what he was seeing. "Massive hyperspace signatures across 17 systems." "Sir," Tony reported, "the Zephyrian Empire just launched simultaneous attacks on the core worlds. Fleet strength appears to be over 3,000 ships. On the display, red markers showed Zephyrian battle groups emerging from hyperspace like a deadly plague spreading across the galaxy. The peaceful core worlds, unprepared for war, were about to learn what real violence looked like." "Sir," called Lieutenant Sarah Johnson from the communication station, "we're receiving distress calls from the Altarian home system. Their defense fleet is gone, sir. 14 minutes from first contact to complete destruction." Gary felt his jaw tighten. The Altarians had laughed at human warnings for 3 years. Now their beautiful ocean world was burning under Zephyrian guns. What about the Centaurans? "Their philosophical council is broadcasting surrender terms," Sarah replied. "The Zephyrians are ignoring them. The Centauran peacekeeping fleet lasted 8 minutes. The Veltar? Their trade ships are fleeing in all directions. The Zephyrians are hunting them down one by one." Gary stared at the tactical display. 3 of the galaxy's major civilizations were collapsing in real time. Billions of lives were ending while he watched. And somewhere in the galaxy, human fleets waited for orders. "Sir," Tony said quietly, "we have incoming transmission from the Galactic Council emergency session." The main screen switched to show the council chamber. Most of the seats were empty. The few delegates who remained were speaking through damaged communication links from fleeing ships. Ambassador Jack Morrison sat in his usual place, but his diplomatic smile was gone. "Ambassador Morrison," the surviving Altarian delegate's voice cracked through heavy static. "We need immediate human military assistance. Our fleets are destroyed. Our worlds are burning. Please, you must help us." Jack looked directly into the camera. His face was cold and hard in a way the other delegates had never seen before. "Help you?" Jack asked quietly. "Didn't you tell us just last month that humans should observe more and speak less about military matters?" The chamber fell silent except for the sound of static from damaged communication links. Captain Lisa Hayes stepped into view behind Jack. Her military bearing had replaced any pretense of diplomatic politeness. For 3 years, we warned you. This was coming, Lisa said. We told you to build defenses. We begged you to take the threat seriously. Your response was to laugh at the paranoid humans. Dr. Kevin Brooks activated a holographic display showing the real-time battle situation. The Zephyrian Empire has deployed exactly 3,147 warships in the first wave. They've taken 18 systems in the first 6 hours. At their current rate, they'll control the entire galaxy within 8 weeks. The alien delegates erupted in panicked voices. They offered trade deals, technology exchanges, entire systems in return for human protection. The same species who had dismissed human concerns were now begging for human help. Jack raised his hand for silence. When he spoke, his voice carried no warmth. The Human Federation will consider all requests for military assistance, he said formally. However, given the Council's previous dismissal of our strategic warnings, we'll need to evaluate each request through proper channels. The Centauran delegate speaking from his fleeing ship couldn't hide his desperation. Proper channels? Morrison, there's no time for bureaucracy. We need help now. Bureaucracy? Jack's smile returned, but it was sharp and cold. Isn't that what you called it when we tried to warn you? When we presented evidence of the Zephyrian buildup? When we begged you to prepare for this exact scenario? Lisa stepped forward. You told us that humans were too violent, too quick to see threats. You said we needed to learn how civilized species handle problems. Well, Jack said, standing up slowly. This is how civilized species handle problems. You talk while your worlds burn. You debate while your people die. You follow proper channels while your civilization ends. The Veltar delegate's voice cut through the chaos. Morrison, surely you won't abandon us now. What happened to human compassion? What happened to doing what's right? Jack walked toward the camera. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but every word carried the weight of 3 years of ignored warnings. You want to know what happened to human compassion? You killed it. Every time you laughed at our warnings, every time you dismissed our concerns, every time you told us to be more like you. He paused, letting the words sink in. You wanted to see what humans are like when we stop caring about everyone else's feelings. You wanted us to stop being so worried about threats that might never come. Congratulations, you're about to find out. The transmission ended, leaving the surviving delegates staring at blank screens. Back on Luna Base, Admiral Thompson was receiving reports from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian advance was exactly as brutal as human intelligence had predicted. No mercy for civilians, no quarter for defenders. Complete destruction of anyone who resisted. Admiral, called Commander Blake, we're receiving thousands of requests for assistance. Individual ships, colonies, even entire systems are begging for human protection. Gary nodded. Begin Phase 2. All fleets are authorized to engage Zephyrian forces, but only to protect human interests and allies who specifically request our help. Sir, what about the species who are asking for help now? Gary looked at the tactical display. The red markers showing Zephyrian forces were spreading like a disease across the galaxy. The blue markers showing human forces were small by comparison, but they were positioned exactly where they needed to be. Commander, for 3 years we tried to save them from themselves. We warned them. We pleaded with them. We offered to help them prepare. They chose to ignore us. Gary's voice was steady, but cold. Now they can live with the consequences of that choice, if they survive long enough. And if they don't survive, sir? Gary looked at his officers. These were men and women who had spent years preparing for this moment while being dismissed as paranoid warmongers by the very people now begging for their help. Then the galaxy will learn what happens when you ignore the warnings, Gary said quietly. And the next time humanity tries to prevent a war, maybe someone will listen. The command center fell silent except for the steady beeping of communication systems, carrying desperate pleas for help from across the galaxy. Help that would come only to those who had earned it. Help that would come on humanity's terms. Help that would come with a price that some species might find too high to pay. Because humans had tried to save the galaxy through diplomacy and warnings. Now they would save it through war. The galaxy was about to learn that there was a huge difference between humans trying to prevent a war and humans fighting one. Admiral Gary Thompson stood in his command center watching the tactical display. For weeks, the other species had seen small groups of human ships scattered across the galaxy. They looked harmless, outnumbered by the massive Zephyrian fleets that were burning their way through system after system. What the Zephyrians didn't know was that those small groups were about to become something much more dangerous. "Admiral," Commander Tony Blake called out, "all units report ready. Operation Ghost Strike is prepared to begin." Gary nodded. "Execute." Across the galaxy, human ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields, behind moons, and in the shadows of dead stars suddenly came alive. They moved with a precision that shocked everyone watching. These weren't random patrol ships. They were coordinated battle groups that had been planning this moment for months. The first strike came at the Kepler Junction, where Colonel Amy Rodriguez commanded a battle group of 30 human ships. Intelligence. Reports showed 200 Zephyrian vessels moving through the system, confident in their overwhelming numbers. Amy watched her tactical display as the enemy fleet approached. The Zephyrians were flying in a standard formation, expecting easy victory like they had found everywhere else. "All ships, this is Colonel Rodriguez." Amy spoke into her communicator. "Remember, we're not here to fight fair. We're here to win." The human ships struck from 6 directions at once. They emerged from behind asteroids where they had been hiding for days. They rose from the gravity wells of planets where their heat signatures had been masked. They appeared from hyperspace at precisely calculated coordinates. The Zephyrians found themselves caught in a trap that had been prepared long before they arrived. Human weapons were different from anything the galaxy had seen before. While other species built beautiful, elegant weapons that followed the civilized rules of war, humans built weapons designed to kill quickly and efficiently. The quantum disruption cannons that Dr. Steve Miller had perfected simply erased enemy ships from existence. One moment a Zephyrian battleship was there, the next moment it was gone, displaced outside normal space-time with no possibility of rescue. Kinetic harpoons punched through energy shields like they weren't there, turning massive warships into clouds of debris. Gravity bombs created artificial black holes that pulled entire squadrons into crushing death. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Zephyrian fleet was completely destroyed. Amy's forces had lost only 3 ships. "Command, this is Rodriguez," Amy reported. "Kepler Junction is clear. We're moving to the next target." "Understood, Colonel," came Gary's voice. "Well done." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as human battle groups struck at Zephyrian forces with surgical precision. Dr. Kevin Brooks coordinated the intelligence war from his position on the council station. Human agents who had been dismissed as harmless scientists and diplomats revealed their true nature. Supply convoys vanished in brilliant flashes of light. Communication networks went silent as relay stations exploded. Command centers found themselves cut off from their fleets as human saboteurs destroyed everything that mattered. Kevin, his assistant Rachel Green, called out, "We're getting reports from deep behind enemy lines. The Zephyrian command structure is falling apart. They can't coordinate their forces." Kevin smiled grimly. "That's the point. Cut off the head, and the body dies." Meanwhile, President Helen Carter addressed the galaxy from the rebuilt United Nations building on Earth. Her speech was broadcast on every channel in every language to every surviving world. "For 3 years, the human species tried to warn you about this threat," Helen said, looking directly into the camera. "We were told we were too violent, too paranoid, too quick to see danger where none existed." The camera moved closer, showing eyes that held no warmth or mercy. "You convinced yourselves that we were the problem, that our warnings were the result of primitive thinking, that civilized species like yourselves would never face real threats because you could talk your way out of anything." She paused, letting her words reach across the burning galaxy. "The Zephyrian Empire has shown you what real monsters look like. They don't care about your philosophy. They don't want to negotiate. They want to own everything and kill everyone who stands in their way." Helen stood up, her voice growing stronger. Now you'll see what happens when monsters make the mistake of threatening a species that spent millions of years as the top predator on a world that tried to kill everything living on it. As her words spread across the galaxy, human fleets struck simultaneously at 17 major Zephyrian strongholds. These weren't random attacks. They were precise strikes at exactly the right targets to cause maximum damage to the enemy war machine. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just days before, began to crumble under an assault that was coordinated, devastating, and completely without mercy. Admiral Thompson watched the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Human forces were winning every engagement, often against impossible odds. The key was that humans didn't fight the way other species expected. "Sir," Tony Blake reported, "the Zephyrian High Command is requesting a ceasefire. They want to negotiate." Gary's laugh was cold. Negotiate? They had 3 years to negotiate. They chose war instead. "What should I tell them, sir?" "Tell them that humans don't negotiate with empires that enslave entire species. Tell them we'll accept only complete surrender." The response came back quickly. The Zephyrians rejected the demand and vowed to fight to the end. Gary shrugged. "Then we'll give them what they want." On the front lines, human soldiers fought with a coordination that seemed impossible to the watching galaxy. They moved like parts of a single organism, anticipating each other's actions and working together in ways that other species couldn't understand. Captain Lisa Hayes led a boarding action against a Zephyrian command ship. Her Marines moved through, the enemy vessel like shadows, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the ship's maze of corridors. "Command, this is Hayes," she reported. "We have the enemy admiral. The ship is secure." "Any casualties?" Gary asked. "None on our side, sir. The enemy crew has been secured." That was the pattern everywhere. Human forces struck like ghosts, achieved their objectives, and vanished before the enemy could respond. They used the galaxy's own geography against their enemies, turning every asteroid field into an ambush point and every nebula into a hiding place. The other species watched in growing amazement and terror as humanity revealed capabilities they had never suspected. Ships that could appear and disappear at will, weapons that could destroy entire fleets in minutes, soldiers who fought with a ruthlessness that seemed almost supernatural. But to Gary Thompson and his officers, it wasn't supernatural at all. It was just what happened when you took a species that had evolved as apex predators and gave them 3 years to prepare for war, while everyone else ignored the warnings. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn what humans were really capable of when they stopped pretending to be civilized. And the rest of the galaxy was watching in shock as their former protectors revealed why they should never have been underestimated. 6 months after the war began, the Zephyrian Empire existed only in history books. Their fleets were scattered atoms floating in space. Their leaders sat in human prison cells waiting for trials. Their worlds were free again, liberated by forces that had appeared from nowhere and struck with deadly precision. The Galactic Council met in a new chamber, this one orbiting Earth. The surviving delegates sat in uncomfortable silence as Ambassador Jack Morrison called the session to order. He still wore his diplomatic uniform, but the smile he showed them now was nothing like the one they remembered. This smile belonged to a species that had just reminded the galaxy why they had once ruled a world full of creatures trying to kill them. "The first item on our agenda," Jack announced, "is the complete restructuring of galactic defense. Clearly, the old system failed." The few surviving Altarian delegates shifted nervously in their water suits. Their beautiful ocean world was safe now, but only because human ships had arrived just in time to stop the Zephyrian bombardment. Half their population was gone. "Ambassador Morrison," one of them said carefully, "we are grateful for human intervention, but surely we can return to the peaceful ways that served us for so long." "No." The word cut through the chamber like a blade. Captain Lisa Hayes, now Admiral Hayes, stood behind Jack. Her uniform bore new decorations, medals earned in battles that had saved entire worlds. "The peaceful ways led to the deaths of billions," Lisa said coldly. "The peaceful ways nearly resulted in the complete destruction of galactic civilization. The peaceful ways end today." Dr. Kevin Brooks, now Director of Galactic Intelligence, activated a holographic display. Every species will contribute to a unified defense network. Every world will maintain minimum military readiness. Every system will have early warning capabilities. He looked directly at the alien delegates. This is not a request. The remaining Centauran representative, his golden feathers dulled by months of running and hiding, spoke carefully. And if we refuse this demand? Jack's smile grew wider. Then you'll be defending yourselves when the next threat appears. And there will be a next threat. The galaxy is full of empires like the Zephyrians waiting for signs of weakness. He stood up, and every delegate in the chamber felt the weight of his presence. You've seen what happened to the last empire that mistook our restraint for weakness. Do you really want to test us again? The chamber fell silent. Everyone remembered the final battle at the Zephyrian homeworld. Human forces had surrounded the planet and offered one last chance for surrender. When the Zephyrian emperor refused, the entire planet had simply vanished, displaced outside normal space-time by weapons that turned physics into a weapon. President Helen Carter's voice came through the communication link from Earth. The human species never wanted to rule the galaxy. We never wanted to be its protectors. We tried to warn you, tried to help you prepare, tried to save you from your own mistakes. Her voice was calm, but carried an edge that made every delegate remember the burning worlds they had fled from. But since you proved incapable of protecting yourselves, we'll do what we must to ensure this never happens again. Admiral Gary Thompson appeared on another screen, speaking from his flagship in orbit around what used to be the Zephyrian capital. We've established permanent human garrisons in 47 systems. These bases will serve as rapid response centers for future threats. The Veltar delegate, one of the few survivors of their merchant empire, buzzed nervously. Permanent garrisons? That sounds like occupation. Gary's expression didn't change. Call it whatever you want, the result is the same. When the next threat emerges, and it will emerge, there will be forces ready to respond immediately instead of waiting for committees to debate and argue while worlds burn. Jack returned to his seat, but his presence still dominated the chamber. Let me be very clear about how things will work from now on. When human intelligence identifies a threat, you will listen. When human military advisors recommend preparations, you will comply. When human commanders give orders during a crisis, you will obey. And if we don't? Asked the Altarian delegate. Jack's smile became predatory. Then you'll face the next threat alone, and we'll watch from a safe distance while you debate and negotiate and follow proper diplomatic channels right up until the moment your civilization ends. The session continued for hours, laying out the new reality of galactic politics. Defense spending requirements, military training standards, intelligence sharing protocols, emergency response procedures. Every detail designed to ensure that what happened with the Zephyrians would never happen again. Later that day, Admiral Thompson reviewed reports from the Outer Rim. His deep space monitors had detected strange signals from beyond the galactic edge. Something big was moving in the void between galaxies. Something that had consumed entire star systems and distant regions of space. He smiled, the same cold smile that had become humanity's new face to the galaxy. Another threat was coming, just as he had predicted. But this time the galaxy would be ready. Admiral, Commander Tony Blake called from his station. We're receiving a transmission from the advanced scouts. They've identified the new threat. It appears to be some kind of machine intelligence. Preliminary estimates suggest a fleet size of over 10,000 ships. Gary nodded. Begin preparations for Operation Deep Strike. Alert all garrison commanders. Activate the reserve fleets. Sir, should we inform the council? Gary considered this. Send them a report. Tell them we've identified a potential threat and are taking appropriate measures. Will they listen this time, sir? Gary looked out at the stars, where human ships patrolled in formations that the galaxy was still learning to understand. Ships crewed by a species that had tried to save everyone through diplomacy and warnings, only to discover that sometimes the universe only respected strength. They'll listen, Gary said quietly, because now they know what happens when they don't. On Earth, President Carter signed the final documents establishing the Human Defense Authority. Every major world in the galaxy would now have human military advisors. Every space lane would be patrolled by human ships. Every threat would be met by forces that understood that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. The galaxy had wanted humans to stop being so worried about dangers that might never come. They had wanted humanity to be more civilized, more peaceful, more like them. Instead, they had learned what happened when you convinced the apex predators to pretend they were prey, and then real predators showed up. Now the galaxy was safe, protected, by a species that had tried to save it through words and ended up saving it through war, protected by humans who no longer smiled diplomatically, but instead showed the cold expression of professional soldiers standing guard against the darkness. The warnings had been ignored. The consequences had been paid in blood and burning worlds. But the galaxy would never make that mistake again, because humanity was watching now, and humans never forgot the lessons learned in war.